Hey everyone, this is Taehyung. Before I start, I just want to say thank you for being here wherever you are, whatever time it is. I want you to know that this story it's not easy for me to tell. But maybe somewhere out there someone needs to hear it. Maybe you will understand a side of me that I've never shown before. I've always believed that love isn't about perfection. It's about connection. The kind that finds you when you're not looking, that grows quietly in the corner of your life until one day you realize it's everything. That's what happened to me. Her name was Suhwa. She wasn't a celebrity, she wasn't from the entertainment world, she was just real. The first time I met her, it wasn't at a glamorous event or through a friend in the industry. It was at an art exhibition in Seoul. She stood there in front of a painting, completely still, her eyes tracing the colors like she was trying to memorize the feeling. There was something about that silence, not empty, but full, that pulled me in. I remember asking her what she thought of the painting. She smiled, barely, and said, "It feels lonely, but in a beautiful way." That's when I knew. That one sentence stayed with me for years. We started talking after that about art, music, time, family. She didn't care that I was an idol. She didn't treat me like one. When we were together, I wasn't Taehyung from BTS. I was just a man learning how to breathe again. But love, as you know, isn't simple, especially when your life isn't private. Every time we met, we had to hide. Every text, every call, every look in public came with risk. The world I lived in wasn't made for quiet love stories. And yet, she stayed, even when rumors began to swirl. Even when she saw how tired I was from pretending nothing was happening, she stayed. It went on for almost 3 years. 3 years of stolen moments, laughter whispered between exhaustion, and dreams that grew in secret. Until one night, I decided to tell my mom. It was after dinner. The house was quiet. My mom was sitting in the living room, reading as she always did. I sat across from her, my heart pounding so hard it felt like my chest was going to explode. I wanted to tell her everything, not as an idol, but as her son. So I said, "Mom, I met someone." She looked up, smiled softly, and said, "That's wonderful. Who is she?" I told her. I told her her name, her heart, her kindness, how she saw me when no one else did. For a moment, my mom didn't say anything. Then her expression changed. Slowly, her smile disappeared. She put the book down and her voice grew quiet, the kind of quiet that scares you because you know it means something serious. "Taehyung," she said, "do you really believe this girl can live in your world?" I didn't know how to answer. She wasn't angry, she wasn't yelling, but every word that came out of her mouth felt heavier than any argument I'd ever had. She doesn't understand what this life costs. The people, the pressure, the eyes watching every move. You think love is enough to survive that? I tried to explain, to tell her that Suhwa was different, that she was strong, grounded, that she loved me for who I was. But my mom only shook her head. "Love doesn't protect you from the world, Taehyung. It can destroy you if you're not careful." That night, something inside me cracked. I went to my room and just sat there, staring at the wall. For the first time, I felt like two parts of me were at war. The son who wanted to make his mother proud, and the man who just wanted to love freely. Days turned into weeks. My mom barely mentioned Suwa again, but I could feel it in the air, the disapproval, the silence, the invisible wall between us. And when I saw Suwa again, I couldn't hide it. She looked at me, read it all in my eyes, and whispered, "Your mom doesn't approve, does she?" I didn't have to answer. She already knew. She smiled the kind of smile people give when they're trying not to break and said, "I understand. She's your mom. She just wants to protect you." But I saw it, the pain behind her calm. That night, I walked her home. It was raining, softly. She held her umbrella and looked at the sky like she was searching for strength. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that we'd make it work somehow. But my words got stuck in my throat. When we reached her door, she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. "If someday your mom tells you to choose, don't hate her for it. She's just scared of losing you. And if that day comes, I hope you still remember me, not as someone who stood in your way, but as someone who loved you enough to step back." I didn't reply. I couldn't. I just watched her walk away. And that's when it hit me how love can be both beautiful and cruel at the same time. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't loving someone, it's loving them in a world that won't let you. That was the night everything changed. Not because we broke up, but because I realized how fragile everything truly was. The next morning, my mom acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled, asked if I'd eaten, reminded me to rest before my schedule, but behind that warmth, I saw guilt, maybe even fear. I didn't know it then, but that silence was the beginning of the end. The days that followed felt heavy, like walking through air too thick to breathe. I tried to lose myself in music, in rehearsals, in the noise of cameras and lights, but silence always found me when the lights turned off. The moment I got home, the quiet wrapped around me like a weight I couldn't shake. I kept telling myself that things would settle down, that time would soften my mother's heart, that maybe if she saw how happy Suwa made me, she'd understand. But deep down, I knew some things time can't fix. A few weeks later, my mom called me into the kitchen. The smell of soup filled the air, something she always made when she wanted to talk about something serious. She didn't look up when she said, "Sit down, Taehyung." My hands felt cold. I knew what was coming. "I've been thinking," she began, stirring the pot, even though it didn't need stirring, "about that girl." Just hearing the word, "that girl," broke something inside me. "She might be kind. I don't doubt that," my mom continued. "But kindness isn't enough. This life, your life, it's not normal. You need someone who understands that, someone who can live in it without breaking." I took a breath, tried to steady my voice. "She doesn't need to be in my world to understand it. She just needs to understand me." My mom finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired, not angry, not cruel, just full of a kind of love that's been shaped by fear. "And what happens when your word hurts her, Taehyung? When your schedules, the rumors, the loneliness swallow her whole? You think love alone can save her?" Her words hit deeper than I expected, because I had thought that I wanted to believe that love was enough. But that moment I saw the truth in her eyes. My mom wasn't trying to control me. She was trying to protect me, protect both of us from a world that devours people who love too loudly. Still, I couldn't accept it. I said, "You always told me to be brave, Mom, to follow what my heart tells me. Why are you asking me to do the opposite now? Her hand trembled slightly as she turned off the stove. Because I've seen what this life does to hearts like yours, she whispered. You give too much, you love too deeply, and when it ends, it destroys you. She paused, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in her eyes. Do you know what it feels like, Taehyung? She said softly, to watch your child break and not be able to fix him? That's when my throat tightened, because she wasn't just talking about me, she was talking about my father. About the years she spent holding everything together after he left, after the silence became their only language. I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to tell her that Suhwa wasn't like that I wasn't like him, but my voice wouldn't come out. We sat there in silence, two people on opposite sides of love, both trying to protect each other, both bleeding in their own way. Later that night, I went to see Suwa. I didn't tell her everything, but she could feel it. We sat in her small apartment, surrounded by her paintings and half-finished sketches. The light from the window spilled softly across her face. She looked tired not from work, but from waiting. She asked me quietly, "What did she say?" He hesitated. She said, "She doesn't think we can survive my world." Suhwa looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "She's not wrong," she whispered. "But it's not about surviving your world, Taehyung. It's about whether we can build our own inside it." I looked at her, at the strength in her stillness, the peace in her pain. I wanted to promise her everything, but promises are heavy when you don't know if you can keep them. She stood up, walked over to one of her paintings, a half-finished portrait of the sky. "Do you know why I paint skies?" she asked. "Why?" "Because no matter how beautiful they are, they never stay the same. You can't keep a sunset. You can't hold a cloud. You just love them while they're there." She turned back to me, her eyes shining but steady. "If your mom asks you to let me go, I'll understand. But if you choose to stay, then you'll have to fight for us. Not against her, but for me, for what we have." Her words stayed with me long after I left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mom's voice, "Love can destroy you," echoing over Suhwa's "Build our own world inside it." Two women, two truths. Both right, both impossible to choose between. Weeks went by like that. Every day I went to practice, smiled for cameras, laughed with the members, and every night I felt like I was disappearing a little more. My heart was living two lives, and neither one felt whole. Then one evening, I came home to find my mom sitting by the window. She didn't say a word as I entered. The air felt different, tense, quiet, heavy, with something unsaid. Finally, she spoke. "She came here today." My heart stopped. "Suva?" My mom nodded slowly. She wanted to talk. She said she needed me to understand. She told me how much she loves you. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. "What did you say to her?" My mom didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told her the truth, that I can't give her my blessing." The words shattered something inside me. I felt the world tilt, like the air itself had vanished. She cried. My mom continued, her voice breaking, but she smiled through it. She said, "Thank you for being honest." Then she bowed and left. I stood there, frozen, trying to breathe. Every heartbeat hurt. Why? I finally said. Why did you have to do that? My mom turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Because I love you too much to watch you get hurt, Taehyung. You think I don't see how fragile you are? You give your heart to everything and everyone, and when they leave, you break. I can't let that happen again. I wanted to scream, to run, to break something, anything, just to make the pain stop. But instead, I stood there in silence because somewhere deep down, I understood her. Still, understanding doesn't stop a heart from breaking. That night, I went back to the river, the same place where Suhwa and I used to sit and talk about our dreams. The city lights reflected on the water, flickering like ghosts of moments we'd never get back. I pulled out my phone, opened our chat, scrolled through messages, laughter, good mornings, I love yous until I couldn't look anymore. And then I saw her last message. It said, "Thank you for loving me even when you couldn't keep me." That's when I broke. For the first time in years, I cried like a child, not because I lost her, but because I realized how much love costs. Love gives you everything, and then it takes a part of you with it when it leaves. When I went home, my mom was waiting. She saw my face, my red eyes, and didn't ask anything. She just hugged me tight, like she used to when I was little. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. But in that silence, I felt something shift. Forgiveness, maybe, or just the understanding that sometimes love and pain come from the same place. I thought I had lost everything that night, but in truth, I had learned something I never understood before, that even when love breaks you, it also builds you into someone stronger. After that night, everything around me felt different, quieter, emptier, heavier. The air in my house was still like the world itself was holding its breath after a storm. My mother and I moved around each other like ghosts, saying little, speaking only when necessary. There was no anger left, only exhaustion. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from everything that had been said and couldn't be taken back. I spent most of my nights alone in the studio. The members thought I was working on new songs, and in a way I was. But the truth was, I wasn't creating music. I was trying to understand pain. I sat in front of the mic, recording pieces of melodies that never became full songs, half whispered lyrics about losing something you weren't ready to let go of. Every chord felt like a confession, every lyric a wound. Sometimes I caught myself checking my phone, scrolling through old pictures, replaying her voice notes' soft laughter, the way she said my name, the way she reminded me to eat when I forgot. It was strange how love lingers in small things, in silence, in habits, in the ghost of a touch you can't forget. A few weeks passed before I saw her again. It was at a small art exhibit downtown, the kind she used to talk about with a sparkle in her eyes. I hadn't planned to go. I just found myself there, standing in front of a painting I didn't recognize. It was a sky familiar, endless, painted in soft colors that seemed to breathe sadness and hope at the same time. And in the corner, almost hidden, was a small signature, Suhwa. My heart stopped. I stood there for a long time, staring at the painting, tracing every brushstroke as if it held the pieces of what we lost. Then I heard a voice behind me. She finished that one the day after you two stopped talking. I turned. It was her friend, the one I'd met a few times. She smiled sadly. She said it was her way of letting go. Letting go. Two simple words that felt heavier than any goodbye. I walked out of the gallery that day and realized that maybe love isn't about holding on forever. Maybe it's about learning when to set someone free, even when every part of you wants to chase them. That night, I went home and found my mom sitting by the piano, my piano. She wasn't playing anything, just staring at the keys. When she saw me, she smiled softly, but her eyes told another story. Do you remember the first time you played for me? She asked. I nodded. You cried, I said. She chuckled. You were 5? You didn't even know how to play properly, but even then, I could feel your heart in every note. She looked down at her hands, her fingers brushing lightly against the keys. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that your heart was your own. I kept trying to protect it, when maybe I was just holding it too tight. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For a long time, I had blamed her for the pain, for the distance, for everything I lost. But in that moment, I saw her differently. Not as a mother trying to control my life, but as a woman trying to keep her child safe from a world she didn't understand. And maybe that was love, too. Just a different kind of love. I'm sorry, she whispered. Those two words, small, trembling, real, were enough to undo me. I walked over, sat beside her, and for the first time in months, we talked. Not as a son and a mother at war, but as two people trying to find their way back to each other. She told me how she stayed up every night after the argument praying I wouldn't hate her. I told her how I kept seeing Sua's face in every dream, how I felt like I had betrayed both of them, my mother by loving her and her by letting go. When I finished, my mom took my hand. You didn't betray anyone, Taehyung. You just loved the only way you knew how. And sometimes love hurts because it's real. We sat there in silence after that, the piano between us like a bridge fragile but enough. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Life went on as it always does. But something inside me had changed. I started writing again, really writing. Not for the charts, not for the fame, but for myself. Every lyric, every melody was a way to breathe again. One of the songs that came from that time was about her. Not directly, not by name, but she was in every line, every breath. It was a song about love that doesn't end even when the story does. When we released it later, fans said it felt different. They said it sounded like healing. Maybe it was. One evening, months after everything, I was walking through the city when I saw her again. She was standing across the street under a row of golden lights, holding a cup of coffee and laughing with a friend. She looked happy. Not the kind of happy that hides pain, but the kind that comes after surviving it. She saw me too. For a moment, time froze. Then she smiled small, gentle, knowing, and I smiled back. No words, no tears, just quiet understanding. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I didn't wish things had gone differently, because maybe they had gone exactly the way they were meant to. Sometimes love doesn't end because it's broken. It ends because it's complete, because it has already given you everything it was supposed to: growth, strength, and the courage to love again. Back home, I sat by the piano again, my mom humming softly in the kitchen. The house felt warm, peaceful, not because everything was perfect, but because we had both learned to live with the imperfections. I pressed a few keys, letting the notes linger in the air. Then I whispered to myself, "Thank you." To her, to my mother, to the version of myself who dared to love even when it hurt. Because love, real love, doesn't destroy you, it rebuilds you. And as the night deepened outside my window, I realized that sometimes the greatest confession isn't about who you lost, but about who you became because of them. Months passed, but the memory never faded, it just softened. It stopped hurting like a wound and started feeling more like a scar, a quiet reminder of something that once mattered deeply. There were days when I'd wake up and forget about it completely, and there were days when a song, a scent, or a faint echo of laughter would pull me right back into that moment, the day I watched love slip away because I wasn't strong enough to fight for it. But that's the thing about time. It doesn't erase what happened. It teaches you how to carry it better. I started spending more time with my guitar again. The studio lights didn't feel as cold anymore. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to feel everything: pain, regret, longing. I turned them all into melody. I poured my heart into every lyric until my voice cracked and my hands trembled on the strings. One night, after recording for hours, I looked up at the glass window of the studio and I saw myself reflected back. Not the idol, not the perfect image fans saw on screen, but me, just Taehyung, a man who had loved, lost, and somehow found his way back to himself. That night, I finished a song I had started months before, the breakup one I could never bring myself to complete. It was called "If You See the Sky Tonight." The lyrics were simple but raw. It was about two people standing under the same sky, separated by distance but connected by memory. When I played it back, something in me shifted. It didn't sound sad anymore. It sounded grateful. I didn't realize it then, but that song would become one of the most personal tracks I ever released. When it came out, fans flooded the comments. Some said it made them cry. Some said it healed them. And one comment stood out: "This song feels like someone saying goodbye with love." That's exactly what it was. As the months turned into a year, I started to feel lighter. My relationship with my mom grew stronger. We talked more, not just about music or career, but about life. She'd ask about my day, and sometimes I'd catch her humming my songs in the kitchen. One evening, I walked in and heard her quietly singing "If You See the Sky Tonight." When she saw me, she smiled and said, "It's beautiful, Taehyung. I finally understand why you had to write it." I smiled back. "I think I finally understand why you did what you did." We didn't need to say more. That was forgiveness, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it transforms it. It turns blame into understanding, distance into closeness. There was a time I thought I would never move on, that my story with her had ended in tragedy. But as I kept growing, I realized not all endings are meant to be sad. Some endings are simply beginnings disguised as heartbreak. Every time I performed that song on stage, I looked up into the lights, into the crowd, and somewhere deep inside, I imagine she was watching too, not with tears, but with peace. One day, during a fan meeting, someone asked me, Taehyung, if you could go back and change anything about that love, would you? I paused. Everyone leaned in, waiting for my answer. And I said, no, because it made me who I am today. The crowd went silent for a moment and then erupted in cheers. But behind my smile, I meant every word. Without that heartbreak, I wouldn't have learned what real love meant. Love that's patient, love that doesn't demand to be owned, love that lets go but never forgets. There are moments in life when pain becomes your greatest teacher. It shows you where you were fragile and where you were stronger than you realized. It shows you how to love better, not just others, but yourself. And maybe that's what this entire journey was about, not losing her but finding me. Now, whenever I step on stage, I don't just sing for the fans. I sing for the boy who was once broken, for the son who learned to forgive, for the man who found peace in imperfection. Every spotlight that hits me feels softer now, warmer, not because the world changed, but because I did. People often ask me, Taehyung, are you happy now? And I tell them the truth. Yes, I am. Because happiness isn't the absence of pain. It's the acceptance of everything that shaped you, even the parts that hurt. Sometimes I still think of her, not with sadness, but with gratitude, because she taught me what love could look like, and my mother taught me what love should feel like. And between those two lessons, I finally understood myself. So if you're listening right now and you've lost someone you love, whether because of distance, time, or circumstance, I want you to remember this. You didn't fail. You grew. You didn't lose them. You found a part of you that only love could reveal. Love isn't about forever. It's about truth. And sometimes the truest love stories are the ones that end, so we can begin again. As the night fades and the stars appear, I look up at the sky and whisper the same words I always do before every concert. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. Then I smile, because now I do. The first time I decided to speak about her publicly, I hesitated. It wasn't because I was afraid of judgment, I had already lived through that. It was because I wanted to make sure that when I finally spoke, I wasn't speaking from pain anymore. I wanted it to come from peace. The interview was for a special documentary, one that focused on the human side of artistry, not fame. When the crew arrived at my home, they expected lights, makeup, stage preparation, but I told them, let's just talk. No filters, no scripts, just truth. We sat in my living room, me, the interviewer, and a few cameras quietly rolling. At first, the questions were simple about my music, my fans, my new album. But then the interviewer leaned forward and asked gently, Taehyung, your songs lately, they sound more emotional, more intimate. Were they inspired by something personal? I smiled, that knowing kind of smile that hides 100 memories. Yes, I said softly, by someone I loved deeply and lost. The room went quiet. Even the sound crew paused, as if the air itself wanted to listen. I continued. It wasn't a dramatic breakup. There were no harsh words, no betrayal. It was circumstance, family, timing, things I couldn't control. My voice trembled slightly, but I didn't hold back. I was broken, when my mom forbade me to marry her. At that time, I thought love had failed me, but now I realize it was love that saved me. The interviewer tilted her head. How do you mean? I looked down for a moment before answering. Because it forced me to grow. It made me see the world differently. I learned that love isn't just about being with someone, it's about understanding why you love them in the first place. And sometimes you don't need a forever to prove it was real. She smiled softly. And your mother? Have you two made peace? Yes, I said, and this time my voice didn't shake. We found our way back to each other. I think she was afraid. She didn't want me to choose pain. But in trying to protect me, she forgot that pain is part of becoming whole. The interviewer nodded slowly, visibly moved. Would you say that this experience changed the way you write music? I leaned back, thinking about it for a moment. Completely, I said. Before, I used to write songs to impress. Now, I write to express. I don't chase perfection anymore. I chase truth. Later that night, after the crew left, I sat alone and replayed the footage in my mind. It felt like I had just closed a chapter, not by forgetting, but by understanding. A few weeks later, the documentary aired, and the internet exploded. Clips of my interview went viral within hours. Fans from all over the world started talking about it, not just about me, but about love. Some said it made them cry, others said it gave them hope. One comment stood out to me. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting the person, it means remembering them with peace. That night, I went live for the fans, something I hadn't done in a while. The chat was flooded with purple hearts and messages of love. I greeted them with a warm smile. Hey everyone, I said. I know many of you watched the interview. I didn't plan to make anyone cry. I promise. The fans filled the chat with "we cried anyway" and laughing emojis. Then I continued. You know, I didn't share that story for sympathy. I shared it because I wanted to remind you that even idols, even artists, are human. We fall, we break, and we rebuild. I paused, looking straight into the camera. And if you're listening right now and you're going through something similar, please don't let that pain make you bitter. Let it make you deeper. Because one day you'll look back and realize that everything you thought was breaking you was actually shaping you. The chat exploded again. Armies were typing messages like, "You're our healing," and "We love you just as you are." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt like I was simply talking to people who understood not the idol, but the man behind him. After the live ended, I sat there for a while, staring at the reflection on the dark screen. Somewhere out there, she might have watched it too. And I hoped, truly hoped, that she smiled. The next day, my team called me to discuss the concept for the new album. They asked me what I wanted it to be about. And I said, love, but not the kind that ends in heartbreak. The kind that teaches you who you are. That's how Golden Sky was born. An album about love, loss, and rebirth. Every track told a different part of the story, not just mine, but everyone's who's ever loved deeply and lost beautifully. The first single we released was Still Yours. And in the bridge, there was a line that said, "Even if I never hold your hand again, my heart still remembers the warmth." When the song came out, it topped charts instantly. But that wasn't what made me proud. What made me proud were the messages from fans, people who said the song helped them forgive, move on, or simply breathe again. And maybe that's what music is supposed to do, not fix the pain, but turn it into something beautiful. As the months went by, my relationship with my mom became stronger than ever. We laughed more. We talked more. Sometimes she'd tease me, saying, "You know, maybe that heartbreak was meant to make you a better artist." And I'd laugh and say, "If that's true, then I guess I owe her a thank you." One evening, after another concert, I walked backstage, exhausted but fulfilled. My mom was waiting there, smiling, proud, and holding a bouquet. She hugged me and whispered, "You did well, my son." And in that moment, I realized something profound. All the pain, the tears, the heartbreak, it had all led here. To this peace, to this version of me who could love without fear, create without boundaries, and live without regret. As I looked out at the sea of lights from the stage that night, I thought about her again. Not with sadness, not even with longing, but with gratitude. Because if love is a journey, then hers was the road that led me home. Years passed quietly, almost too quietly. The world around me kept changing tours, albums, awards, flashing lights, but inside I carried a calmness that no fame could shake. Time had turned my heartbreak into wisdom. The pain that once felt unbearable had softened into gratitude. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when everything went still, I'd find myself wondering, where is she now? Was she happy? Did she ever find someone who loved her the way I couldn't? I didn't ask those questions because I wanted her back. I asked because love, real love, doesn't vanish. It just changes shape. It was during one of my art events in Seoul years later that life surprised me again. I was walking through the gallery after the show ended, greeting a few guests and thanking fans who had come to support. And then I saw it, a painting hanging near the far wall, soft blues, muted pinks, and gentle brushstrokes that felt familiar. The kind of colors only one person ever used. My heart froze. The label beside it read, "Artist, Suwa." I took a slow breath and walked closer. The painting showed a sky split between dawn and dusk, half sunlight, half starlight, like two worlds meeting for a moment before parting again. And in small writing at the bottom corner, there were words painted delicately in white. For the one who taught me to see beauty even in goodbye. My throat tightened. I didn't hear her footsteps behind me, but somehow I knew she was there. When I turned around, she stood just a few feet away, older, more graceful, but still the same gentle presence I remembered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if time had stopped again, just to let us breathe in that silence. She smiled first, that same soft, calm smile that once made my heart race. "Hi, Taehyung," she said. Her voice hadn't changed, only matured, like a melody sung at a slower tempo. I smiled back, unable to hide the warmth in my chest. "Hi, Suhwa." For a while, we just stood there, surrounded by art, by years, by everything we didn't say. Then she said quietly, "I saw your documentary." I chuckled softly. "I was hoping you wouldn't." She laughed. It was beautiful, honest. There was no bitterness in her tone, no pain, just peace. And that somehow was more overwhelming than anything else. We walked around the gallery together, catching up, on the small things, her art, my music, how our lives had unfolded in ways neither of us planned. She told me she had moved abroad for a few years, focusing on her art, teaching young students. I told her about the album, the tour, and my mom. She smiled when I said that my mother and I were closer than ever. She must be proud, she said. She is, I replied. Then, after a pause, I added, she was right about some things and wrong about others. Suhwa laughed softly. Aren't all mothers? The conversation felt easy, gentle, natural. It was strange how, after all those years, there was no awkwardness, no heaviness, just understanding. When the event ended and people started leaving, we stood outside the gallery under a silver moon. The city lights shimmered on the river nearby, and for a moment everything felt still. I looked at her and said, you know, I used to think our story ended too soon. She tilted her head curious. And now? I smiled. Now I think it ended exactly when it needed to. She nodded slowly. Maybe it did. There was a soft breeze carrying the scent of spring, the kind of air that feels like a beginning, not an ending. She reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. Here, she said, I wanted you to have this. I opened it later that night. Inside was a letter, simple, handwritten, with small ink smudges that looked like tiny raindrops. Taehyung, I used to think we lost something precious when we said goodbye. But now, I know we didn't lose it, we became it. You carried it through your music, I carried it through my art. And maybe that's how love survives, not through staying, but through creating. Thank you for being my reason to paint again. Suva. I sat there for a long time after reading it, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Then I looked up at the same night sky that had once felt so cruel and whispered, thank you. Because she was right. We didn't lose it. We became it. The next morning, I sat at my piano and began to write again. A new melody, soft and slow like dawn, rising after a long night. The song was called The Sky Between Us. It wasn't a sad song. It wasn't a love song either. It was a song about two souls who met, changed each other, and moved on carrying pieces of one another forever. When it released months later, fans said it made them feel at peace. And maybe that was the greatest compliment I could ever receive. Because peace, not fame, not success, not applause, was what I had been chasing all along. Sometimes when I play that song live, I see faces in the crowd holding up signs that say, love never really ends. And I smile because I know they're right. Love doesn't end when people part. It ends when it's forgotten. And ours, it lived on in every note, every color, every moment that made us who we are. One night after a concert, as I stood alone backstage, I looked up at the sky. The moon was bright, the same moon that had witnessed our laughter, our tears, our goodbyes. And for the first time, I didn't wish things had been different. Because everything that had happened, every heartbreak, every silence, every song had led me here. To peace, to understanding, to love in its truest, quietest form. I whispered softly, wherever you are, I hope you are happy. And as the lights dimmed, I smiled not because I missed her, but because I finally understood what love was always meant to be. Not forever, not possession, just truth. Hey everyone, it's me, Taehyung. If you've listened this far, maybe you already know this isn't just a story about love. It's a story about learning how to let go and still love anyway. People often ask me, do you regret anything? And I always smile before answering because regret is a strange thing. It only exists when you believe that something should have gone differently. But I've learned that everything, even heartbreak, has a purpose. When I was younger, I thought love meant holding on no matter what. Now I know sometimes love means knowing when to let someone go so both of you can keep growing. My mom once told me something I didn't understand back then. She said, Taehyung, life will break you if you try to live it perfectly. Let it shape you instead. Back then, her words sounded harsh. Now, I understand she wasn't trying to stop me from loving. She was trying to teach me what love really means, not the kind that burns bright and fades, but the kind that leaves a quiet warmth even after it's gone. If I could speak to my younger self, I'd tell him this. Don't be afraid of breaking. Every crack lets light in. There were nights when I thought I'd never feel whole again, when the silence in my apartment was too loud, when the letters stayed unread, when I played the same melody over and over just to feel something familiar. But healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in fragments, in moments you don't even notice. A morning coffee that tastes good again. A sunset that feels peaceful instead of lonely. A song that makes you smile instead of cry. One day you just realize you made it. And that's what love does. It doesn't disappear when people leave. It transforms into something softer, something that lives quietly in the spaces of your heart. Sometimes I still think of her not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because without her, I wouldn't have learned to write from my soul. Without her, I wouldn't have understood that art, like love, is about feeling deeply even when it hurts. If you're listening right now, and maybe you've lost someone you loved, I want you to remember this. You didn't lose them completely. You carry them in every song you hum, every decision you make, every time you choose kindness even when it's hard. That's love's way of staying quietly, endlessly. When I look back now, I don't see heartbreak anymore. I see growth. I see a boy who became a man because he dared to feel deeply, because he refused to let fear turn him cold. And maybe that's the real confession. Not that I was broken when my mom forbade me to marry her, but that I was reborn because of it. Love didn't end that. It simply changed form. It became the laughter I share with my friends, the comfort I give my fans, the music that reaches hearts I'll never meet. So if you ever find yourself standing at the edge of a goodbye, don't be afraid. Sometimes endings are just beginnings wearing a different name. And if you ever wonder whether love can survive without forever, I'm here to tell you it can. Because I'm living proof that even when love breaks you, it also builds you. So here's my message to you, wherever you are in the world. Love bravely, let go gently, and never stop believing that even in heartbreak, there's beauty waiting to be found. Thank you for listening, for feeling this story with me, and for reminding me that no story about love ever truly ends. I'll see you again in the next song. There's something I never showed anyone, not even my members, not my parents, not even my manager. It was a letter, a simple folded piece of paper, the one she gave me before she left Seoul. I found it again last winter, tucked between the pages of an old book I used to carry everywhere. The moment I touched it, I froze. It still smelled faintly like her perfume, that soft, floral scent that used to fill my studio every time she visited. My hands trembled, and for a second, it felt like time stopped. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, the paper slightly yellowed, the ink slightly smudged, like it had been waiting for years to be read. Part of me was scared because I didn't know what her last words would do to me. It took me 3 days before I finally opened it. 3 days of pacing, remembering, questioning, and when I did, I swear it felt like my heart forgot how to beat. Her handwriting was the same round, a little messy but beautiful. And the first line said, "If you're reading this, it means you've healed enough to remember me without pain." I remember sitting there, reading that line again and again, because somehow she knew exactly when I'd be ready. She wrote about her dreams, the life she built far away, how she still played the old melodies we used to make together, how she hoped I'd found peace in music again. And then came the part that broke me. "Taehyung, please don't hate your mother. She only wanted to protect you from a future that could have broken you worse than love ever could." I didn't realize I was crying until I saw the ink start to blur. That sentence, it was the one thing I never expected to read. For years, I had turned my pain into walls. I blamed fate, timing, even my own heart. But I never thought to see it from her side. My mom wasn't my enemy. She was just a mother, scared to see her son hurt, trying to protect me the only way she knew how. When I finished reading, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt release, like the part of me that had been stuck in that moment finally started to move again. I folded the letter back carefully and placed it inside my guitar case. It felt right because every song I write now carries a piece of her and a piece of forgiveness. That night, I sat by my window, guitar on my lap, and started humming a melody I'd never heard before. It was simple, tender, almost like a lullaby, but it felt like she was there singing it with me. It's strange how love finds its way back, not always through people, but through the moments that remind us we were loved once deeply and truly. If you've ever lost someone, whether to distance, silence, or time, maybe you know what I mean. There's always something left behind. A word, a memory, a letter, and sometimes that's all we need to keep going. When the night turned quiet, I whispered something to the stars, not as an idol, not as a son, not as someone who had to be perfect, but just as Taehyung. Thank you for loving me when I didn't even know how to love myself. And in that moment, I realized the story didn't end when she walked away. It ended here with me finally learning to forgive. Because maybe the real closure isn't about hearing their voice again, it's about learning to listen to your own. There's one more thing I never told anyone. A secret only my studio walls have heard. It's a song, one that never made it to the world. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because it was too real. I wrote it years ago, right after she left. Back when my voice still shook every time I said her name. The melody came to me one night when I couldn't sleep. Soft piano chords, a whisper of rain outside, and a line that kept repeating in my head. Even silence remembers you. I recorded it in one take. No edits, no polish. Just me, a mic, and everything I was too scared to say out loud. When I finished, I sat there in the dark. The song played back through the speakers, and for a moment, I didn't even recognize my own voice. It didn't sound like the Taehyung the world knew. It sounded like a version of me that only existed when I was alone. Raw, fragile, and human. I titled it Winter's Promise because winter was the season she left, and I promised myself that someday I'd be strong enough to let her go. But I never released it. Every time I tried, something stopped me. Maybe fear, maybe respect, or maybe because some songs are meant to stay personal, like a sealed letter between your soul and your past. For years, that track stayed buried in an old hard drive, and sometimes, late at night, I'd play it again, not to mourn, but to remember the version of me who still believed love could fix everything. Now, when I listen to it, it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels like looking at a photograph, a beautiful memory frozen in time, something that shaped me but no longer controls me. And that's when I realized the song didn't need to be released. It already did what it was meant to do. It healed me. You see, every artist has that one piece of work they can't show the world because it's too honest, too close to the bone, and for me, that was Winter's Promise. But maybe that's why art is so powerful. It doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it just needs to exist because healing doesn't always come from being hurt. Sometimes it comes from finally hearing yourself. When I finally showed the song to my mom, she didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside me, eyes closed, listening, and when it ended, she whispered, "Now I understand." That's when I realized she wasn't the villain in my story. She was part of the song all along. Every decision she made, even the painful ones, was another note in the melody of who I've become. I don't know if I'll ever release that track. Maybe one day when it doesn't feel like a goodbye anymore. But for now, it stays between me and the moment it was born. Because some love stories aren't meant to be told. They're meant to be felt in silence, in art, in the spaces between the words. So, to anyone listening right now, if you've ever written something, painted something, sung something that never saw the light of day, don't think it was wasted. It served its purpose. It saved a part of you no one else could. That's what this song did for me. It taught me that closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, like the final note of a song fading into stillness. And maybe that's the most beautiful sound of all. There's a certain stillness that comes after you tell your story. A silence that feels heavier than sound. That's where I am right now, sitting here, staring into the lens, knowing that somewhere out there, someone needed to hear this. You see, I used to believe that sharing pain made you weak, that silence was strength. But now I understand silence only makes your wounds echo louder. And sometimes all it takes is one truth spoken out loud to begin to heal. For years, I carried this story inside me. The heartbreak, the guilt, the unspoken words, the what ifs. And it changed the way I saw love, the way I wrote music, the way I saw myself in the mirror. But telling this, It feels like closing a door that's been open for far too long. There's a quote I once wrote in my notebook. Every goodbye has a melody, you just have to listen closely to hear it. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. Because this is that melody. The one that plays when you finally stop chasing the past and start walking toward peace. I don't hate my mother. I don't resent her anymore. In fact, I thank her because if she hadn't stopped me, maybe I wouldn't have learned what real love is. Not the kind that ends in a wedding, but the kind that survives even after everything falls apart. And to the woman who once held my heart, if you ever hear this, wherever you are, thank you. You were my beginning, and in some quiet way, you'll always be part of my music. Every time I sing about love, every time I look at the stars and feel something ache inside, I know a part of that comes from you. But I've learned something beautiful too, that love doesn't have to stay to be real. Sometimes it just has to happen once and it changes everything forever. I think that's what makes us human. Our ability to love deeply, lose completely, and still wake up the next day wanting to love again. So, if you're watching this right now, and maybe you're holding on to something heavy, someone you couldn't keep, a dream that didn't work out, a goodbye you never wanted to say, I hope you know this. You're not broken. You're just becoming someone new. And one day, you'll look back and realize every scar you carry was really a doorway to strength. I used to think my story ended the day she left. But now I know that was just the beginning of who I was meant to be. And maybe that's what love is. Not a person, not a promise, but a lesson written into our souls. When I finish this video, I'll turn off the lights in this room. The camera will stop rolling. But for the first time in years, I won't feel like something's missing. Because I finally told the truth. Because I finally let her go. So, this isn't a sad ending. It's just quiet, peaceful, like the last note of a song that finally finds its place. Thank you for listening, for staying until the end, for letting me share a piece of my heart with you. And remember, no story about love ever really ends. It just finds a new rhythm in the next heartbeat. Good night, everyone. And wherever you are, I hope love finds you again. It's been years now, and yet sometimes when I walk through the streets of Seoul at night, I still catch fragments of her in the air. A faint laugh echoing from a cafe corner. A melody playing from someone's phone that sounds too familiar. The way the wind feels colder after sunset, it all reminds me of a time that feels both near and impossibly far away. I used to think healing meant forgetting, but now I know it means remembering differently. It means looking back without falling apart. It means seeing her face in a memory and smiling instead of breaking. There's something sacred about time. It doesn't erase. It transforms. Pain softens. Love changes shape. And one day, what used to make you cry starts to make you grateful. Sometimes, after practice, when the studio lights are dim, I sit by the piano again. Not to write, not to record, just to feel. My fingers move without thinking, and somehow that same melody from Winter's Promise comes back to me. Only now it sounds different. Not sad, just quiet, like a conversation that no longer needs words. I think about what I'd say to her if we ever met again. And honestly, I don't think I'd say much. Maybe just a simple thank you for being part of my story. Because that's all it really was. A chapter, a beautiful one, the kind that hurts to end but makes the whole book worth reading. When people ask me about love now, I don't talk about forever. I talk about presence. The way someone's energy can change you even if they're gone. The way their laughter stays in your heart like sunlight through glass. Love doesn't always stay. Sometimes it just passes through, but while it's there, it transforms you completely. And when it leaves behind echoes that never fade. I think that's what I wanted to say all along. That even when it breaks you, love still gives you something beautiful. A new way to feel, a new way to see the world, a new song that only you can hear. So if you're still waiting for healing, please know it's already happening. Not loudly, not all at once, but in the quiet moments you don't notice. In your breathing, in your small smiles, in the way you're still here, still listening, is still loving. And maybe that's what she meant in her letter. That love never really leaves. It just learns to return in silence, in peace, in you. Hey, if you're still here, listening until now, thank you. I don't know why, but I never imagined anyone would listen this long to a story that's not glamorous, not perfect, not filtered, just human. When I first shared this, I was scared. Scared of how people would see me. Scared that showing the cracks in my heart would make me look weak. But maybe weakness isn't something to hide. Maybe it's where love lives. You know, people always say, you're Taehyung, you have everything. But